Hello and welcome. We have a special guest with us today. He is the podcast host, super producer extraordinaire, the head, the leader of the Creative Control Network, Mr. Joe Feeney. Joe, welcome in. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing very well. It is an honor to be here, man, on the two-man power trip, the Empire. I like being a part of the Empire, so
Yes. All
happy
about
to
the
be
man
here.
power trip. Yes.
Yeah.
There's so much going on with me, but I feel like there's more going on with you. What's going on with the Creative Control Network lately? You seem like you're almost too busy.
I mean, usually I have a pretty good rhythm for my stuff that I'm doing all week. Sometimes there's more to do, sometimes there's less. Uh, like I was saying before we got on the air, COVID, much like it hurt everyone's business, it did hurt my side of podcasting and everything and trying to get sponsors and whatnot. So I've been kind of kicking that into high gear the last few weeks, like really looking for sponsors, like hours and hours a day, trying to get some new connections and stuff like that. But CCN's cool because most of the shows now, they just get sent to me ready. So when I first started it, I was doing a lot of editing through the shows that showed up and quickly found out I didn't have enough time to do all that. So most of the shows show up ready. My busiest part of my week kind of comes with like I said, the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, like 3-day block when I do all the Konnan stuff, record it all, and then, bang it out and have it ready for a release on Thursday, an ad-free release Thursday morning. And then in there, I'm also putting up other shows. I put up Taskmaster Talks, of course, with Kevin Sullivan and yourself. And then Thursday night, when I'm done everything and I'm about to take a breath, I record the Raven Effect with Raven and Rich Bikini. So after that, it's kind of like once I'm done the Raven Effect, then I can go sit down and it's like, whew, all right, let's, I can take it easy for a couple of days here. But, whenever I would call this a business, right? The Creative Control Network, it's a business. My podcasting that I do for the other shows all together, it's all a part of one business. So when you're running your own business, you're the owner of your own business. It's like you're never off the clock. There's always something to do. There's always someone to respond to. In this line of work, there's always social media promotion to do. There's always looking for sponsors. There's always, hey, let me check the numbers, see how this did. So it's really like a 24/7 deal. But at least once Thursday night late hits, I'm pretty good. I can calm down a little bit. But Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the frantic days.
Now with Conan, you're doing Patreon too, right? I mean, so that's even extra added stuff that you got going on.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, initially it was Kevin Kleinrock running the Keeping It 100 Patreon, and Kevin has a shoot job as well as all these other things that he does for Expo Lucha being set up and everything like that, everything for the Master Republic. So eventually he was like, it doesn't make any sense for you to send me the clips and then I upload them. So here's the password, start doing it. And then I got a cut of the Patreon money. And then eventually he was like, you're doing all the work. My share is yours. Oh, cool. I'll take that. Every dollar counts. And so that's become a pretty cool deal because we've been having a lot more interaction with the listeners and stuff since COVID. Konnan and Disco have a lot more time. Konnan can't travel. Disco's club that he works at has been, shut down the whole time. They can't open over there in Vegas. So we've had more time. We're doing a lot more interaction with the listeners, including, match watch-alongs, roundtables after AEW and NXT and pay-per-views, one-on-one calls, music debates. Like there's been a whole lot of stuff going on there. So after I took it over from Kevin, it's becoming more and more successful as the months go by. And it's really become more successful in the past few months because we've been able to put so much new content on there and fresh content. So what I do now is try to make sure that there's something new every day because as I'm sure and you see out there, the Patreons, man, there's going to be a lot of competition coming up. Conrad, he's stacking that lineup, man. So you gotta bring something to the table to compete with that, so.
Yeah, and it's funny. A while ago, I was talking to Conrad, obviously privately, and he was like, "Oh man, you got to start doing Patreon." And I looked at his Patreon. I was like, "He's not doing shit on Patreon. What's he talking about? I got to do Patreon." And he's telling him, "No, do it." And then all of a sudden, ramping up. Dr. Tom told me he's doing something with him like this, brother. And, obviously all the shows are going to be video, and obviously you got Arn and Tony and Eric and stuff. Obviously, big brother Brucey, but it's like, wow, like he was right. You got to do the Patreon gimmick. It's like the next wave, and it's a good way to make money and not have to worry about cursing or having somebody say, "Oh, you got to take that down." It was too controversial.
It's funny because everyone likes to take credit. I was the first to do this, or I was the first to do that. Keeping It 100 with Konnan was the first wrestling podcast on Patreon. It really was. It's before I was involved, But so they put it up there and not having any idea what kind of model to use or price model or whatever. Their 2 tiers were $1 and $5. So it was like a little extra income or whatever, but it wasn't, making a lot because of the price. The prices were so low for each package or tier or whatever. So now there's, it's $5 for the lowest, 10. There's a 15 to get the show early. 25 is all the video content. 40 is where you're going to get all that interaction, where you come in and join the round tables or do the match watch alongs and whatnot. So we've managed to make it into a pretty solid, income for the 3 hosts, which is great, especially with, the uncertainty of the world right now and everybody's income. So yeah, I'm really proud of that because of how it's really shot up in the past few months. Like as far as subscribers, the money's gone up and people are just really, really enjoying it. We get so many emails or DMs about people that are saying this is worth every penny, and all that. So I'm proud of that.
And what do you think about Konnan, the babyface, and Disco, the heel, and that kind of dynamic? Because Disco, to me, and they call me crazy, he's right a lot, like 90% of the time when he's talking about a topic. I tend to I was like, wow, he, I'm going in his direction. I usually am kind of on his side. Not that I like the heels or whatever, but I feel like he usually makes sense. He's he knows his stuff.
Yeah, it's funny to be on that show now because I was listening to Konnan back when he first started with MLW Radio. If you remember in that 2012 time period, 2011, 2012, 2013, a lot of shows started popping up. And I'm not sure, when did you guys start Two-Man Power?
2015.
2015. Yeah. So that era was kind of like when things started. I started in 2014 and, but then you had Austin and Jericho popping up after MLW. The show everyone listened to back in the day was MLW Radio and Colt Cabana because that's all there was at first.
Yep.
But I always listened to MLW Radio. Konnan was on with Court Bauer and MSL. And then they had a paywall. It was one of the first shows to have things behind a paywall. It wasn't a Patreon. I don't know. It was just, MLW VIP or whatever. And they started bringing Disco on. They brought him on one time. It was just like him and Konnan catching up. Hey, how you doing? And then they would bring him on for specific shows. And then he was doing a show with MSL. And I feel the same way. I always thought Disco was great. He was just great audio, great content. And he's proven it now. Obviously he's doing Keeping It 100. He's drawing people to our Patreon. He's on Realm with Vince. He's on a Patreon with Vince, and that's, some people might go, wow, the guy's on 4 shows. Yeah, but everything's different. Every show's different. He talks about different things. So, but yeah, I find myself agreeing with him a lot, and sometimes I don't. But
yeah,
despite the fact that the persona on Twitter and whatnot is that he's like, the heel or whatever, I think most honest people would be like, Disco, he's logical a lot of the times. He makes a lot of good points.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing with Russo, obviously he's on with Russo and the Russo brand. Why the hell does he call you Mike Feeney? I've been dying to ask you, what is Mike Feeney? What is that?
He at one point when he was talking about something, he was talking about me, and then he was also talking about Mike Durbin. And somehow he combined the name like 1 or 2 times. He'd be like, yeah, Mike Feeney with Creative Control. And so, of course, Jeff started calling me Mike to lead to even more confusion. Mike Durbin called me Mike to lead even more. So he knows my name, but I think it's become the in-joke now, especially on that show that he doesn't know or he thinks my name's Mike or whatever. Then you had your Twitter parody accounts where there was a Mike Feeney Twitter account. People started thinking I had a brother named Mike. I'm like, no, this is not a real. But yeah, but I've known, not known, but I've been dealing with Vince since early on when I was doing Creative Control, when it was mostly a wrestling show. He was one of my first really big guests, and always liked Vince. I like to tell people on different interviews I've done that, when my mom passed away, he absolutely went out of his way, sent me a very touching, DM and, offered, support and condolences and all this stuff. And I just thought there was a few people in wrestling who I didn't, weren't my best friends or anything, but went out of their way to reach out at that time. And I've never forgotten the guys that did, and Vince is one of those guys. So I'm always a supporter of the brand, and like Vince a lot.
Yeah, he's such a nice guy. I think a lot of people might have a different opinion of him for whatever reason. They don't know him, or they don't really, or they believe in the character. When we've interviewed him, he said literally people think he's like an asshole from New York. They literally believe the character they saw on TV. It's like, I don't know about that. But when you really look at it, and I always say it's to him, Steve Austin, The Rock, Mick Foley, they all love him. At Goldust, those are for I don't know, medium sized to gigantic friggin' names in wrestling. They all love them, so it's like weird that some people don't. I know WCW might have had, I don't know, maybe rub people the wrong way or whatever happened in WCW, but it feels like the big names. Oh, and Shawn Michaels always liked it. So it's like all the big names like him.
Yeah. So whose opinion are you going to respect? You know, The
Yep.
Rock, Mick Foley,
Yep.
or are you going to listen to some guys that, you know, were lower mid carders at TNA who didn't like the way Vince wrote for them, or
Yep.
pretty much said, "Hey, we've got nothing for you. The old creative has nothing for you." Uh,
Mhm.
I've always liked him. Like I said, I've read his books. You know, I listen to the brand, and you know, it's just wild that that he, you know, he is where he is, and he kind of got blackballed after that last TNA stint. You know, you'd have to think he would have something to offer to anyone who gave him the chance to consult or whatever, but
Yep.
seems like it's not in the cards.
It's weird. Wrestling may be the only business where if somebody is successful, they get knocked down. Like, nobody says, "Oh, Pujols, oh, he stinks." Or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not saying that he's as good as Pujols or something like that, but let's just say, level of success and good writing. Wrestling may be the only business where you get knocked for success because politics or somebody doesn't like you or they want to rip you down. It's weird.
Yeah, Konnan has always said on Keeping It 100 that wrestling's the only business where it's like that. For example, if on Game of Thrones, you know, like the guy who played Jon Snow had heat with one of the writers, you know, they wouldn't stop and push
Yeah.
or bury him. You know,
Yeah.
the story is what's important first. You know, and wrestling's always had that problem. It's never been the story's the most important thing. It's always been like control. And I mean,
Mhm.
one thing you can specifically look at was when the invasion started and WCW came in, you know, Booker T and DDP and Buff was there for a minute and Chronic and O'Hare and whoever else came in, Shane Helms, you know, they came in and most of those guys, especially DDP, just didn't do anything but get their asses beat. You know, Taker squashed DDP a lot. And now it was because, you know, they wanted to prove, WWE as a whole wanted to prove they were the superior organization. Even though WCW was dead and they owned it, they still had to kick dirt on them, you know, and
Yep.
if they were serving the story, they would have made WCW a lot more threatening. DDP would have hit that diamond cutter. Oh my God, he got a pin over the legendary Undertaker, stuff like that. Booker T would have got a win over The Rock. He never got that, you know. It's just that's just one of the examples when you look at guys coming in from company to company and then they get jobbed out to start because the promoter or the booker or the writers want to prove something to the guy and prove something to the audience. You know, we're bigger than this guy, you know.
It's so true. It's like, wow, you have this invasion storyline.
Mm.
First of all, you don't bring in Flair at that time. You don't bring in Goldberg at the time. You don't bring in Sting till 15 years later. Hall and Nash and Hogan come in later. So you're missing the key elements. So you got to get over DDP and Booker T, who are already kind of legit stars. Even Buff to a certain point. Obviously, with Jim Ross and that whole thing, there was some more issues there.
Yeah.
Who the hell knows? But
Yeah.
but it's like, wow, if you're the booker, you got to get these guys over instead of The Rock going, I don't even know who the hell you are. And then he pins them. And
Yeah.
then it furthers that. And then they have him and Booker T and Shane versus The Rock. And then The Rock wins again. It's like, holy crap. So, yeah, you don't bury things. You try to get it over.
Yeah, and that's like I've gone through time periods where you know, hardcore fan, I'll watch all of Raw, I'll keep up with, you know, any of the smaller shows, I'll be watching TNA or AEW, whatever. And there's times where I'm just fed up. And the first time I got fed up when I was younger was when Hogan beat Yokozuna at WrestleMania 9. And a lot of people tell that same story. I've heard Conrad tell it. I have friends that tell the same story. 1993 people, a lot of fans back out. They're of a certain age. They're turning into teenagers. It's still corny. Hogan's did this. Brett lost the belt. Ugh. So they don't watch for a while. And then they come back, you know, when the NWO forms. Oh my God, what's this? Hogan turned heel. And who's this Austin guy? What's ECW? All
Mhm.
those cool things were happening at once. But my long story short, the reason I said that was after the invasion or during the invasion, when I saw a lot of WCW or ECW favorites get squashed like that, that's another time when I kind of said, all right, I'm stepping away because they don't care about the, you know, telling the best story. They only care about, you know, showing who's the power, you know. And it
Yep.
doesn't matter whether Raven was super talented or Taz or whoever. They never really gave those guys a chance, and that's a bummer for people that were big fans of theirs. And the list of names is way longer than that, but that's just the
Yep.
two that came to mind.
Yep. Just an interesting sidebar because I'm just thinking of invasions and I'm thinking about you in Philadelphia. Did you
Yeah.
used to go to the ROH CZW feud when that was going on?
No, unfortunately, and I still want to go back and watch it because I hear great things. I think I watched the culmination, whatever it was, the cage match at the end. But I had a weird thing where I missed Ring of Honor. Like I
Oh man.
here for the beginning. I wasn't there. I didn't catch a Ring of Honor show until probably something like 2009 or 2010. So I was way behind. Somehow I was a 3PW fan. Do you remember 3PW?
Oh yeah, I literally just interviewed Todd Gordon today, who's the booker, obviously
Yeah.
for Jasmine and Meanie. Yeah.
So it was the first show I had gone to in a long time, probably since ECW closed. It was December of 2003 or 2004. And a friend of mine was like, it's at the arena. And I had gone to ECW a lot. I'd gone to indie shows there eventually and loved the building, still do. So I went to this 3PW show. We all had a great time, and it became our place to go every month or every 6 weeks, me and like a big group of 8 to 10 friends or whatever. And we were young, so really the reason to go was to pound beers and, you know, yell at the ring and all that. We were kind of Philly fans, but so I was always watching 3PW then and going to their events. In the meantime, Ring of Honor is going on over here, and I knew of it, and I always read up on what was going on around the industry, but I wasn't a Ring of Honor fan at the time, just because I wasn't that big of a wrestling fan at the time. 3PW was my outlet for getting my wrestling fix.
Crazy. The Ring of Honor was so good at that point because WWE, like you said, after the invasion thing, I mean, I still watch and stuff, but he kind of gets soured on some of the stuff. It's like, oh, that sucked and that sucked. And Austin retires and becomes a sheriff. That was so damn lame. It's like,
Yeah.
oh God. So ROH and CZW, the reason I bring it up is just because I'm thinking Philadelphia and the invasion. They did an invasion angle. CZW kept winning and winning. It was ROH's 100th anniversary show. They literally had a section of the crowd in the Armory, which is a great venue. They had the CZW fans and the ROH fans.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember me and my buddy came in late, so we had to sit on the CZW side. But like they were nuts. They literally ripped down a Ring of Honor sign. They win at the 100th anniversary. But it was just like, wow, the booking of that now. Not only ROH fans dying to come back because they're losing and they want to see CZW get their ass kicked.
Yeah.
CZW fans are coming back to gloat and literally show that they ripped up the ROH stuff. It was so cool. Obviously, smaller crowd, a couple thousand rather than many thousands of WWE. But it was just so cool. It's like, wow, that's how an invasion angle should have been done. The keel's got to go over and make you think that, like, holy shit, these guys are going to lose to the to this not upstart really, but like this outlaw show. What the hell? And I was at the ECW arena. They did it like an invasion of the arena when Ring of Honor ran a show. They literally ran everybody out of the building. People were like legitimately scared.
Yeah.
Like Gabe, supposedly he was booking at that point. Like that's how you book. Like that was such a good job. How come WWE can't do it? It's just petty bullshit.
Yeah, and that, well, first off, it's funny to me how you mentioned that, how hardcore the CZW fan base used to be.
Used to be, yep.
Not so much anymore,
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, the same thing happened when Vince finally got Hogan, Hall, and Nash back for the NWO. They came in, they wrecked guys a couple of times, and then that was it. Hall lost at Mania, Hogan lost at Mania, turned face, and they never took advantage of the NWO, the group, the logo, the music, the way to book that group. And by May, Hall was gone, and it was the shits. But can I curse?
Yep. Oh yeah, go for it.
All right. Yeah. So same thing there. They wanted to prove something to these guys. We can't let the NWO beat up The Rock and Austin. Then that's going to say they're better than, like, that's that weird mentality they have in wrestling. It's strange. And as you said with the CZW Ring of Honor thing, the only way that those invasion things work is when people put egos aside.
And it was so well done by Gabe and the guys. And even when ROH won the blow-off feud, it was even so well done because Danielson basically tried to hurt his own team because he only cared about the title. So that made sense. And then Homicide came out for the save, which was the long-term build of Danielson versus Homicide for the title. I mean, it was just so well done. And obviously Samoa Joe was more TNA at that point. So they're kind of writing him off with that knee injury. It was just excellently well done, and it almost looked like the odds were against ROH. Like, I don't know, just when you see beautiful booking like that, you're like, why can't that get done more often, and why can't they do it in the big leagues? It's crazy.
Yeah, I think what pulled me away from Ring of Honor was the fact that, like I said, my group of friends and I were going more for like party ECW atmosphere.
Yep.
Ring of Honor was a little more serious. I don't know if the group of friends I was going to the shows with at the time would have been into that. There was kind of the separation of the fan base, even all the way back then, from ECW and partying and screaming and yelling sexist chants and all this that the ECW fans were known for. And then you have Ring of Honor, which turns much more respectful. It's people timing the matches and taking everything very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
You know, nowadays you look at it, the fan base, it's more that Ring of Honor style, taking everything seriously, the matches, the star ratings, all that, than the ECW fan base, which was like, we're here to party and enjoy ourselves, and if it's good, we're going to be loud, and if it sucks, we're going to tell you, you know?
Yep.
So it seems to me back then is kind of when the fan base started to change.
Absolutely. When you do your shows, and not just Conan, but even Creative Control and like your other shows, do you think it's more current wrestling, or do you think more people care about the old school wrestling?
Old school, because not when we have Keeping It 100 has a YouTube channel, Keeping It 100 official. Husey runs it from Creative Control Network.
Mm-hmm.
And I go on there a lot and answer comments and read what people are saying and stuff. And without a doubt, the clips that get the most views, listens, downloads, whatever, would be WCW questions. The WCW's been going 19 and a half years, you know. And then AEW. People like to listen almost like in a Cornette type way. If Disco is burying AEW, they want to hear that, just like they want to hear Cornette do it. But I think the proof is in the pudding when it comes to, you know, the biggest wrestling podcast, you know, to come out in the last 5 years was Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard. And that was all about the past, you know. Guys like me who aren't too thrilled with wrestling today, you know, they want to hear about, you know, WrestleMania 7 and whose idea was it to turn, you know, Slaughter, you know, into an Iraqi sympathizer. And let's talk about, you know, SummerSlam 96. Man, what happened with Michaels and Vader? What, he kicked him in the ring? Was that a shoot? And stuff like that people still want to hear about and have their questions answered. So people care much more about the 80s and 90s. I don't think, you know, in 2040, there's going to be too many people asking about, you know, hey, let's talk about the retribution angle, you know, like, or let's talk about what's the guy's name that won the Money in the Bank?
Otis.
Yeah, let's talk about Otis's push. You know, I just don't think people are interested in it like they are, or like they were back in the day. I could be wrong. Maybe this generation is really crazy about it and they're going to want these shows in 20 years. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see it.
No, I don't see it at all either. And I can't believe I was looking at WB.com. And you think it was their Twitter, but it's associated with WB.com. And it said Mustafa Ali's turn with Retribution is like Hogan's heel turn with the NWO. It's just like, oh my God. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, who gives a shit about that guy? Oh my God.
Yeah, like they have to put over the present day when they do stuff like that. Like I remember seeing, hey, what are the top 10 stables of all time? And then somehow they listed Undisputed Era and the New Day in the top 10 ever. I'm like, oof. I mean, those guys are great and all, but that's a little bit of a stretch. I mean, we don't really know that yet, do we? So, but they always do that with their lists. You know, they always put a couple of names from the president there because they have to.
Yeah, yeah. I was just laughing about the Ali thing. I was like, Hulk Hogan. I was like, friggin' Hulk Hogan, the biggest star of all time, turning heel and literally changing the business where we went from a down swoon to friggin' rocket ship because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, holy crap. Ali, who I think they lost on Raw. So it's like, come on.
Yeah, a little bit of a difference there, right?
Absolutely, just utterly ridiculous. Some of this stuff. When you know, get your shows on the network, let's say Hurricane Helms or even Husey stuff, like how do you pick and choose like what you want on the Creative Control Network?
Well, it started out a little bit different, and I was just sitting around one day and I thought, you know, I kind of learned how to do this from scratch. You know, I started out recording over my phone. The shows are brutal, but I learned how to book a guest. I learned how to format an interview, questions, whatever. And then I started learning how to make money doing it. I learned how to find sponsors, or, you know, find different sponsors and get the word out about them and stuff like that. And I always and where to share the show. Hey, I want my show on Spotify. How do I do that? Some people don't know how easy that is. They don't know how to do it. Hey, now my show is on Amazon Music. Amazon has podcasts now. How do I do it? Some people don't know, you know, stuff like that. So my plan was to help people like kind of get a break via this Creative Control Network. And then I would plug their stuff on Konnan's show, and then people would hear their name for the first time or whatever. You know, I started from scratch, and I thought people, if they had that passion for it too, and they had something to say, that I could help. I could help you learn how to, you know, upload your show, and I can hunt for sponsors for you. We can grow together and all this. So when it started, a couple of wrestling shows started with me, which was an honorable mention with Shane Hagedorn and Jeff Schwartz. Shane was with Ring of Honor forever. Jeff was a huge Ring of Honor fan, and they were doing that Pritchard and Conrad formula to Ring of Honor. and they've been with me ever since. So it's like, okay, that's a solid one because there's a market for that. Then Pat McNeil and Jim Valley brought Way Back Playback over. Okay, Pat is known from the Torch. He's been doing podcasts and writing forever. Jim Valley at that point, I think, was known from the Wrestling Observer. He's in the hospital right now, been in for a while. So get well soon, Jim. But okay, those guys have some recognizability, if that's a word. So bring them on over. Then there were some lesser known guys who just wanted to try and they didn't last that long. And then out of nowhere, Animal's lawyer reached out to me, Road Warrior Animal. And he and Joe Roderick were doing a podcast on a smaller scale on like Joe's website or something like that. And they saw what I was doing and they were like, well, would you want to, distribute this show and find sponsors and blah, blah, blah. So once Animal joined, it kind of changed the network, where at first it was like, hey, it's going to be like a dark horse network. It's going to be like up and comers and stuff. Now we've got a Hall of Famer on here. So it's a little different. Back then I wasn't picking and choosing too much. If you sent me a show idea and I thought it was a good idea and you had a good voice, I'd probably give you a chance. That was back then. Now I feel like everything is where I want it to be. And I probably wouldn't add shows anymore. It would take something special for me to put something new on Creative Control Network. Like when you come to me and say, hey, I have Kevin Sullivan. Would you want to? Of course I would. Absolutely. Or when Chad comes to me, hey, would you want to put up the Francine audio? Of course I would. Absolutely. Why wouldn't I? But there's been a lot of shows. Hey, we do a sports show, or hey, we're talking present day wrestling. There's a lot of wrestling, suggestions. We do this wrestling show. And I don't think it's, all the time I put on the network now, I think there's enough of wrestling over here. There's comedy here. There's MMA. There's sports. There's names like Shane Helms and Kevin Sullivan and Francine. Hughesy's doing comedy. Mike Durbin's doing his thing over here. Hambone's doing his thing. And then you got guys, like I said, honorable mention, Way Back Playback. And it's like, I feel like all the slots that I wanted filled right now are filled. The only thing, I don't know if there's any, like, there might be one more slot in my head where it's like, geez, it would be cool to have someone on there doing movie reviews or something like that. But other than that, I feel like it's full. Like there's no selection process per se. Back in the day, it was a little bit more open, and now it's kind of like the doors are almost completely closed. It would take special circumstances to really bring somebody on. At this point, it would either be a name, or if you had, like a really great concept or something that's not already a need that's not already being filled by the network, whether it be a movie podcast or politics. I don't have a political show, stuff like that. It would just have to be something different. I don't just want Johnny's wrestling podcast reviewing Raw and SmackDown. There's a million of them. It's not going to help me or you to have it on there, so.
Yeah, sometimes some of the shows I just look at them like, not saying like, oh, great or anything. It's just like, I don't know why that they want to get that out there. It's like some of them, current Raw review. It's like, it's so bad. It's like the show sucks. How could you possibly make it entertaining? The show itself sucks.
Well, when I started, it was almost like, it was 2014. So some shows were out, like I said, Colt Show and MLW and Austin and Jericho by that time. And other shows were popping up for sure. And I just wanted to do interviews like you guys, It was like, so I got, names that I wanted to interview, or guys that were they were lesser known, but they were local to Philly and I knew their stories, like I had Nick Burke on.
Oh yeah.
Or Ruckus. People know who Ruckus is, but
yes.
Maybe not.
Yep.
And then I got lucky and I had guys like Russo on and Disco and, Ed Ferrara came on, and then I had Bruce Pritchard and Tom Pritchard and, DDP came on. I was like, oh shit, and I just it was almost like a shoot interview format. How'd you get started? Tell me about this, this, and this. It wasn't the groundbreaking concept, but I feel like I was pretty good at that style, and people would tell me a lot. This isn't like a fake pat on the back. People would be like, you have a really natural interview style. Like you put people at ease, this and that. So unfortunately, like I kind of ran out of guests. And it's funny for me because you guys still find new guests that you want to talk to,
Yeah.
So pursue it a little bit harder than I did. I kind of slowed down. And then once I got on Konnan's show and that started taking up a lot of time, I didn't necessarily lose interest in my show, but it was a combination of time being spent elsewhere and not really seeing any guests in the future that I am dying to talk to. Like at this point, the only guys that I would really want to talk to as far as wrestling interviews anymore would be like Bret Hart, Hogan, Austin, and these things aren't going to happen. Nash, maybe Nash is gettable. I don't know. But I mean, I eventually had Raven, who I always wanted. I eventually had Konnan, who I always wanted. And, so I wanted to change the show, but I forget what we were talking about here because I went on a side note. What were we talking about?
Just the creative control and like the shows and stuff.
Yeah. So so I started doing just like a wrestling interview show. And I never did like a present day review or Raw or SmackDown. It takes enough time to already watch the show. I just watched the show for 3 hours, and now I'm going to hear you talk about it. That being said, I did used to listen to the Observer Radio and Observer Live with Dave Meltzer and Brian Alvarez when I was a little bit more hardcore. Now you can't even get me to watch Raw, and I'm on all these different wrestling podcasts, and I'm not watching. It's funny. I'm in one of my highlights, so yeah.
So who's been like your favorite guest when you had, because didn't you just, not just, but didn't you just put up a special you did with Jackie Martling, Jackie the Joke Man?
Yeah, well, when I tried to change the show last year, my idea was I always said to people, like, I don't, like, I've pigeonholed myself. I've done 5 years of wrestling stuff mostly, and I wanted to switch the way the show was known and what it was known for. So I changed it to Creative Control Daily, and the idea at the point was to do 5 or 6 shows a week and have different segments. One would be, hey, here's a comedian, and then here's this segment with me, Husey, and Durbin just messing around, and then here's another segment with a sports writer, whatever it was. And it did okay for a little while, but again, at that point, I had Konnan's show, I started Raven's show, and I was working with Conrad on 4 shows a week or whatever it was, and I just couldn't juggle everything. And unfortunately, Creative Control Daily, what it changed into, suffered from that. But I was able to get some cool guests while I was running with that concept. I still would hope to bring it back once I have time. Like, I'll never fold that show or say, hey, no more Creative Control. It's definitely suffered, but it's always there if I need it, And as far as wrestling guests, Konnan was great. Raven, Russo, Bruce Pritchard was great. I actually had Bruce before Something to Wrestle With started. So it's kind of funny to listen to that and hear some of Bruce's catchphrases before they were catchphrases.
Yeah. Yep.
And he used some of them on that show, like rumor and innuendo. Like, he uses that. People might think, oh, it's just a t-shirt. No, he was using that back in the day. And DDP was great. Steve Carino was an early guest. He was great. There was Disco, of course. I had him on a couple of times. So I got really lucky with wrestling guests. Bischoff. Oh yeah, Bischoff was one that I always wanted on. Got him on, yeah. And when I changed the format of the show, I got to have Jackie the Joke Man on, and that's I was a big Stern fan back then. Listened to it every day on my way to high school, and sometimes through classes.
Yep, absolutely.
And then I listened to it. The Artie Lang years I listened to, and like a lot of people, it's kind of fallen off for me in the past 10 years or whatever it's been. But it was great to have Jackie on. I had a former Guns N' Roses guitar player on there, Bumblefoot, Ron Thal, which was cool. He's actually a huge wrestling fan. He's the guy that got CM Punk and Colt Cabana into the Guns N' Roses concert. Remember, there's a bunch of stories about that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So they were cool with Bumble, so that's how that happened. So we talked music. I had a guy on named Frank Lisandro, and the reason I had him on was I'm a big Doors fan and Jim Morrison. And so now that I had changed the show to like whatever topics I wanted, that's the kind of thing I wanted to explore. So Frank was one of Jim Morrison's friends. He made movies with him, and hung out with him, stuff like that. So he had written a book. We had him on to promote it. And then he sent me a copy of the book and signed it and all, which was really cool. But so I had this Jim Morrison special, and Frank was on it. So I got to have a Jim Morrison episode with like one of his best friends. I got to talk to Bumblefoot, who was a guitar player for GNR, one of my favorite bands. And I got to have Jackie on, which, he had been on my favorite radio show. So that was cool for when I tried to change the format of the show. I've been very lucky overall, whether it's wrestling guests or entertainment. And hopefully when I start the show up again, I can continue to be as lucky.
Nice. It is hard getting guests. My OCD, I some reason I just can't stop. It just keeps rolling. Some people can't keep up, but I just keep going.
I like seeing the announcements because it's either like, oh, they got somebody good, or it's like someone I had forgotten about. And it's like,
yeah,
oh, nice one. They're not doing the circuit. This is going to be a unique interview because you're the only guys that have them.
Yeah, that's the one good thing. Sometimes the downloads don't get there, but sometimes you know, like Dave Yohannan, who's an old school WWF guy, that some people would like message me like, you know, oh my god, where's he been? Blah blah. I thought he was dead, like you know, or
Mm.
whatever. You know, I haven't heard his name, so I get the rare ones. But obviously, you know, with the downloads, maybe okay. But for me personally, I love it. You know, getting some of those guys like Tony Garea. People are like, hello, Tony Garea. Oh my god.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's cool sometimes, but yeah, it's sometimes a pain in the ass getting together, getting them to do it, getting the time, screwing it, you know, them up, getting their contact. I mean, there's a million things that could go wrong. So
right.
it's a pain in the ass.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And I mean, that's where I'm at, where I don't want to say it all like dried up or whatever, but I can't think off the top of my head of, oh, I have to talk to this person. Like it's just not there for me right now. So I'm happy doing Konnan show, and I'm happy doing Raven show and the other stuff with the CCN. And if it ever comes back to me doing Creative Control Daily or whatever, that's cool. Like I said, it'll always be in my back pocket. It's funny because even though I was doing Creative Control and interviewing, when I started Konnan show, I had no intention of being on the air on that show. I was just going to edit it and produce it, upload it, whatever. Their third host was Kevin Gill. And, you know, those guys had a falling out. And I came in to replace Kevin out of necessity in September 2017, which is crazy that I've been on the show for 3 years. But and then I evolved on the air as, you know, what kind of third co-host this show needed and stuff like that. And, you know, whether it's a comedic, you know, or you know, they got to kick somebody when they're down, that kind of thing. There's some of that to it too. But they also look to me for like kind of fan knowledge and different things. And I can chop it up on almost any subject, whether it's music or movies or TV or history or politics. So it's an interesting slot. It's just, it's funny that I never intended it. And I don't think Konnan did either, to be honest with you, but I wound up on the show, and that's probably where I spend the most time during my podcasting week, you know, so.
And you mentioned you were producing for Conrad. What were like? How did that come about? How were you producing for his shows as well?
Well, I was a big listener of Something to Wrestle With once it started. And actually, the only WrestleMania weekend I went down to was in 2017 in Orlando. So I went down there and I brought my wife, and it was kind of like a tradesies, like walk around and do the wrestling stuff with me for 2.5, 3 days. And then we'll spend another 5 days at Disney World, because like I said, it was in Orlando.
Nice.
And so I picked a bunch of different events to go to. Like I went to WrestleCon during the day when she was chilling out. We went to Wale Mania the first night. You know, that seems like something cool to do. You bring, you know, a girl with you, your wife, whatever. Hey, it's a big party at a club. Cool. It doesn't matter that it's wrestling related, you know?
Right.
But one of the things I picked was I was going to go to the first live Something to Wrestle With. So it was the first time Bruce and Conrad did a live show. They brought out Jeff Jarrett. They brought out Hornswoggle. It was like this crazy party atmosphere, you know, in a small bar in Orlando. And I knew Bruce from having him on my show. And then I grew to know Conrad because I was just a big fan of their stuff. I went to see them again in Philly later that year and just developed a friendship. So from what I understand, Matt Kuhn was producing the shows, and he had an itch to go do his own show and other things. And I really don't know what the falling out was, but he wound up leaving, and they knew, Conrad and Bruce knew that I produced Konnan show, and they knew that I was a fan as well. So, hey, let's try to bring this guy in. And it was just as easy as that. Bruce called me and said, we're going to have an open slot. Do you want it? And I said, I sure do. Because at that point, any opportunity that was presented, I was going to take. Right. You know? So it went from there. And then I never worked on Tony's show. Tony, as far as I know, has always done his own uploading and production and editing. He might just be a stickler for that. I don't know. But they announced the Bischoff show. I started doing that. Then JR came aboard, then Arn. And I was doing all the shows for Conrad. And I don't know if I burned out or, you know, Matt wanted to come back and stuff. So we switched spots again. Now Matt's back over there doing those shows, and I have more time to concentrate on other things, which is fine by me. And I think it's for the best. So, but yeah, I worked for Conrad and those shows for like 2 years and change as well.
Nice. I actually know Matt very, very well.
Yeah.
I may have actually inadvertently got him involved in the business, but I don't know. I'll have to ask him about that. This is going back years, but no, I'm very friendly with him. We go back for a good guy. But as far as you, I think if I remember correctly, was that the time that we met in Philly and you wanted to get something recorded with Shane? I'm trying to think if that was that night or not.
I mean, I was there during one of the conventions, and it was August of 2017. And I just had a table with Joel Gertner. So I would go and try to get some notice off my Keep It 100 and whatever, and creative control, which people knew about a little bit, and sell a shirt or a book, or I had a table full of action figures I would sell as well. And then Joel would do his pictures and, all that stuff, autographs. And while I was there, Konnan would bust my balls. I'd be like, you got to get us some drops. You got to get us some drops. You got to get us some drops. So, if I knew a talent, or if I knew it would work for the show, or if it was someone I'd interviewed in the past, I would walk around and I got a drop from, Sammy Callahan and some other guys. And then I wanted to get one from Shane, and that's what you facilitated.
Yeah.
So I got a drop from Shane at that time as well. That was already 3 years ago, which is crazy.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that's just crazy how fast time goes by. Just weird. And Shane, of course, was a pain in the ass getting him to get that done. You know how Shane is. He's a pain in the ass.
But he knocked it out. He did a good job.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as like doing different shows and being a producer and stuff, how do you actually like learn to do that? Like, how did you learn to edit? How did you learn to be a producer? Where did that come from? Did you go to school for it early on? And like, where does that kind of background come from?
I had no background.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's interesting. I kind of fell ass backwards into it, to be honest with you. I had a warehouse management job, and towards the end of the summer 2014, I got told with like a week notice or something that hey, we're eliminating your job because the lease is up and we're moving to a building that's just an office. So this company's no longer going to have a warehouse. We're going to farm the work out. Good luck. That's basically it. So I had some money saved, and I cashed out my 401k, and I had already returned to school that year because my interest was always like, I want to do some kind of writing somewhere. I'm still searching for that answer, but it turned towards like, I want to write for TV, maybe like be in a writer's room for a drama, maybe have my own pilot, which I've been working on forever, that kind of thing. But that also turned into, wouldn't it be cool if I went to school and got a writing for television degree, and I went up in the world of wrestling? And there was a podcast on MLW radio called The Writer's Room, and they would have guys like Alex Greenfield and Andrew Goldstein on, and Court, all these guys that had written for WWE.
Yep.
So I would listen to that, and it kind of inspired me, like, man, maybe I want to try this, even if it didn't work or it was a terrible experience. I could always say, man, I got my foot in the door there, and I actually worked for WWE, because at that time it was only WWE, and TNA was kind of fallen. So there's not a million wrestling writer positions, right? So I returned to school, and I was trying to figure out, like, what am I going to do to try to get my foot in the door? And there was a seminar at the Monster Factory over in Paulsboro, New Jersey. And the seminar was with Joel Gertner. It's how I met Joel. And it was called Everything But the Wrestling. So basically, everything but the bumps and ring he was going to talk about. Getting into the business, the politics backstage, how to do this, how to do that, cut promos, create a character and stuff. And when he went around the room, was like, oh, you're a wrestler, cut me a promo. Oh, you want to be a referee? Let's run this spot and show me how you would do it. And when he got to me, well, what are you doing here? I was like, well, I want to be creatively involved in wrestling somehow, and, booker, writer, whatever I can sink my teeth into and get my hands on, I would do, that's my dream or whatever. And he said, all right, write me a promo right now for, the Blue Meanie, who was there and was one of the trainers and was sitting behind me. And there was another guy, and unfortunately I can't remember his name, but he was a big grizzled looking dude. And so it was basically, I wrote a promo where Meanie was approaching him to join the Blue World Order. It was that was it. Just came up with it off the top of my head. People seemed to enjoy it. And I got cool with Joel, and I got cool with the owner of the Monster Factory, Danny Cage. So it would be like, hey, come down and check out training. And then maybe you can, shoot some video for us, hang out, meet some of the guys and girls, and, now come to the show next weekend. Maybe you could write a review and check in with the talent and see, hey, what's their finisher called? Make sure you throw that stuff. So Danny would have me write reviews and previews for the Monster Factory wrestling shows. I would also interview, some of the talent, text interviews. And I would send them around to like the Observer and One Wrestling and stuff like that. Now that led into me being able to get interviews with other talent. So then I had a text interview with Homicide that was in a wrestling magazine called Alternative Wrestling Magazine or something like that. That led to me doing DVD reviews. So High Spots would send me a box of DVDs, and I think Kayfabe Commentaries gave me access to their stuff. And next thing you know, I was writing reviews, and I had a review of Timeline with Bret Hart it was on the Observer site, One Wrestling, and PW Insider at the same time. I thought that was like my pinnacle, right?
Mhm.
Holy crap! I'm on the three, big wrestling sites at the same time. And then eventually someone was like, why don't you try a podcast? And I was like, ugh. It's like, I don't know. I don't know how to do it. I don't particularly like my own voice. It doesn't seem like something I'd be into. But much like the seminar, which I kind of forced myself to go to, normally it was on a Saturday. Normally I wake up on a Saturday, I'll blow off any plan there is. I've been known to do it. But that day, something forced me to go. I was like, get off your ass and go to the seminar at the Monster Factory with Gertner, and I did it. So with the podcasting, I felt the same way. I forced myself to do it. Just try it, just try it. And maybe it'd be another way to get your foot in. So I liked it. I wasn't good at it at first. And that's not like, being humble. I wasn't good at it at first. I was nervous and stammering, and my questions might not have been great, and the style wasn't there. And not only that, but the audio quality was the shits, because like I said, I had no training. So I was recording on my phone and uploading. It was terrible. So eventually, when I started to take it seriously, I found an editing program called Audacity, which was like freeware or whatever. And I taught myself how to edit through Audacity. And although it's a free program, it has everything that you need to edit audio. And I taught myself through there. I don't know any other program. I know guys that use, Rock Band or whatever, or, all these other things. That's cool. I know how to use Audacity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, at one point, after I'd done the podcast for like a year or so, my wife and I were moving, and I had some extra money and stuff. And okay, let's get it, because we had a 1-bedroom when we started dating and got married. And then it turned into, let's get a 2-bedroom. And I want the 2nd bedroom to be an office. I'm really going to start doing this seriously. So I bought some podcasting equipment. I'm still using the same equipment. And I just got better at it as I went. And I learned more and more how to use Audacity. And when I got on board with Konnan and keeping it 100, that forced me to learn even more than I had already learned, because there's some, tricks and whatnot to that show. You insert this here, you put music under this. And I was just self-taught, to tell, it's a long version, long way around, but I was absolutely self-taught. I had no broadcasting or editing training whatsoever. It's just, I was a guy who lost his job and had an idea that I wanted to do other things. And I had some lucky breaks, and between the lucky breaks and, being a quick learner for stuff, it just worked out. And now it's been 6 years since I lost that job. And here I am with, I'm a guy that didn't think he would be good at podcasting and didn't want to do it. And this is just how things turned out.
Yeah, quite a trajectory for you. Like, you didn't want to do it, but you were doing stuff with the Monster Factory.
Yeah.
Kind of pretty cool. Like, you didn't really think he was going to do anything, and then takes off.
Yeah. And I sometimes wonder, excuse me, because like I said, I went to the arena when I was ECW arena when I was young, toyed around with the idea of training, did the backyard wrestling thing and stuff when I was younger. It just didn't happen. Never trained, flirted with the idea, probably emailed some local schools, just never did it. And then by the mid 2000s, I was still going to 3PW shows and stuff. And I always think like, geez, if I would have tried to write articles back then, or maybe even do a live audio or radio show or whatever before it was podcast, I just wonder if I would be further along here, if I would have quit by now, if the timing was right for me or whatever. And I don't know, but I was the kind of guy who, when the show ended, I left. I went home. I wasn't hanging out afterwards trying to meet the wrestlers. I just wasn't that kind of fan. Show's over, I'm out. I'm not bothering any of these guys or girls, And so it was all different for me back then. I didn't pursue it, even though I had the little whispers of a dream. Later on, when I finally pursued it, things kind of just steamrolled for me. I got lucky.
Yeah, I mean, look at you now, and even obviously with Road War Animals passing, but you had Road War Animal show, Vampiro used to have on, obviously Hurricane Helms. I mean, a lot of different guys and a lot of different opportunities. So, I mean, you're building quite a strong brand.
Trying to, and it's sometimes it's the same for everyone. When you get overworked, you get grumpy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'm a little overworked and I'm grouchy, and my wife has to remind me, like, just remember what you're doing for a living right now and shut up and stop bitching.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I kind of look at it and I clear my perspective a little bit, I'm like, I'm working with Raven on Raven Effect. I was an enormous Raven fan forever. I like this podcast. I went to see him do stand up. Like, I'm a Raven guy. So once a week I get to record with him. should be grateful, right? I was listening to Konnan on MLW radio from the time it started. I was listening to Keeping It 100 when he jumped to the Jericho Network. I thought Disco was a great podcast when he was on MLW. Fan of both guys. I record with them multiple hours a week. Should be grateful, right? That's the kind of thing that I try to keep telling myself. I have Shane Helms and Kevin Sullivan and Francine on the network now. You know, I have other smaller shows. I have guys that I have friendships with now that I met and all this. And so when I get a little bummed out and like tired or whatever, I just remind myself, be grateful, because kind of think about this stuff. Think about what you would think 5-6 years ago if you were to go back in time and tell yourself 6 years younger what you were going to be doing today, and you probably wouldn't believe it. You know, there's been I got to do Talk is Jericho. That's unbelievable. You know, how did that happen? I don't know, but I was on Talk is Jericho once.
Yeah, how did that happen? I was going to ask you about that, because you were a guest on Jericho. I think you were talking about GNR, right? You're talking about a lot of music stuff. So.
No. I mean, that might be coming up, but with Jericho, we did our top 10 Stephen King books.
Oh, okay. Didn't you record something with him about GNR though?
No, but we've talked.
Oh, okay.
We've talked about it. So I might be coming up, but
okay.
It's easy to think that, being that I've recorded so much different GNR stuff on different shows and on my own.
Yeah.
But no, I obviously knew Chris a little bit from being, when I joined Keeping It 100, it was on the Jericho Network. So I dealt with him for some things, and then I met him in Philly after one of the Fozzy shows in spring 2018. So, I mean, I'm not big time. Me and Jericho are friends or whatever, but we're, became casual friends, and we were texting about other things that weren't, hey, what should I do for the show? Like, we would talk about music or TV shows or whatever. I would text him after a match if I thought it was good, stuff like that. And I guess at one point, there's like a group text with Chris, Shane Helms, Konnan, and Disco, and me. Again, it's like, should be grateful. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And somewhere in there, I guess me and Shane were talking about books, and Chris jumped in and we talked about Stephen King. So COVID was hitting. I think he needed a guest it would be easy to call, and there's no, he didn't have to interview me in person, of course. And maybe he just needed extra content, but he was like, listen, why don't you come on and we'll talk about Stephen King, favorite 10 books or whatever. And I filled up an hour with him, and I learned some new stuff to make sure I could have something to talk about on the show. And pretty crazy. So again, being from a guy that was watching Jericho for 20 years and went to, pay for a picture with him just a few years prior and see him host a debate between Pritchard and Bischoff. And, it's just, the next thing you know, just a few years later, I was on the show. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, that's awesome. And to think about, like, wow, like he's having me on as a guest, not the other way around. I mean, that's pretty honorable. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah. So I get to have that. I can always brag about that, right? I was a guest. That is pretty cool.
How did he say it went? Did he enjoy your appearance on the show?
Yeah. And we joked about it because I saw his lineup for that week, and it was like Tuesday, FTR's first interview, WBE. Friday, Joe Feeney. I'm screwed. So then he was like, no, the numbers were really good. So now I say on Keeping It 100 that I blew FTR away. Like, I doubled their numbers. So that's my story. Sticking to it, right?
Yes, that's the disco model right there. The disco psychology. Nice.
Yeah, I remember in a segment once in TNA back when Kevin Nash was doing the paparazzi production stuff. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that was so fucking good. I love that. Yep.
Alex Shelley, and so Alex Shelley was like his protege or whatever, and he's telling him something. And whatever the idea was, and Alex is talking to Nash, and he's like, so I such and such, and I thought of this. And he goes, I didn't really think of that. That was actually, Chris Sabin that thought of it. And Kevin Nash goes, listen, I'm going to teach you a lesson here. Rule number 1, always take credit for everything. So, and never let the truth get in the way of a good story. So
yes. And then there's another awesome one where Shelley says to him, "Oh, when you beat Bob Backlund MSG," he goes, "Oh, it was in front of 23,000 people, sold out." He goes, "But the garden only holds 18,000." He goes, "No, the vendors, you got to count."
Yeah, classic. That's some of the best stuff Nash ever did. I still go on YouTube and watch them every now and then.
Man,
send them to people and whatnot.
Somebody on YouTube, and I gotta find it. They literally had them in order, and I can't find it. You know when you like it, and then you try to go back and you can't find it, so it must have been deleted by somebody. But somebody put them in order, and I was like, "This is awesome!" And I remember I sent it to my brother at the time, and now I can't get it back. Can't find it.
Oh Yeah, I heard they were gonna put a DVD out, and like it never happened. Like, what a letdown, you know? That was great.
I think Jared or something was like, yeah, it's in the works, or somebody had mentioned that DVD was going to come out. It never did. I would have bought that in 2 seconds. I would have got that.
Yeah, I even think one of those sites might still be around, but one of the sites that was around back in the day, like WWE DVD News or whatever the hell, even had a cover, like a cover, like it's coming. There must have been a problem with Nash or somebody, and then they just kiboshed it. But it wouldn't have been a huge mega Austin 316 hit, but the people that knew about it would have certainly bought it, you know?
Yep. Now I got to mention this because it's your favorite show. You guys are obsessed with it and all this stuff you got going on. Konnan doesn't like it. Disco has told me he's not a fan. Russo said he doesn't want any mention of it. Jeff Lane is talking it up like it's the greatest thing of all time. Get my go.
In a show talking about different strange things, what a strange thing. I don't even know where to start on that. It's like when I was starting the network, shortly thereafter, I met Husey on. He was a Keeping It 100 listener, and he had a YouTube show, and he was like, do you want to do my show? And I didn't know that I knew him, but I knew him from other YouTube clips, and I remember it was like early in the morning, and that summer I kept having stomach and lower abdomen pains. I'm all good now, but so I was actually in the hospital like overnight. And I was all doped up, and I'm like on my way home, and I guess like the drugs hit or something because I was feeling kind of smirky and friendly. So he caught me in like a drug friendly haze because I was coming home from the hospital. All right, I'll do your show right now. I'll be home in 15 minutes. Just funny, and that's how we connected. So I did his show, and eventually he's like, I've only been doing this YouTube version. So what if I brought the audio version to Creative Control Network? I said, perfect. Because to me, when you were talking earlier about, what kind of shows you're looking for, requirements, this and that, there's a dude from Ireland. He's doing a comedy show. I didn't have a comedy show. It's the first show that I have that's not based in America. It's different. Perfect. And it went from there. And I still say to him to this day, which he denies, that, the Get My Go show, it's all about, making fun of Wrestling with Reality, as it was called. And John Wangland was the host. And then his only cohort now, Chris Martin, who does Inspire with Christopher. But with Wrestling with Reality, Husey did the show and then sent Wangland my way. You should put these guys on the network. They're good. I don't know where that came from. He's like, no, you found them. So nobody wants to take credit for it. So John was on the network for a few months, and then he came to me and he was like, I'm going to leave. I want to start my own network. And he told me over the phone about it. I know in his version, he's like, I couldn't get a hold of him. I'm tough to get a hold of sometimes. There's nothing. I don't even have any excuse. There's just nothing I can do about it. And so when he finally got a hold of me, it was like, all right, I really didn't care. And this isn't like Get My Go where I'm busting balls. Like, I really didn't care. It was, he'd only been around a few months. He even asked me like, how, like, cause back then I would charge incoming shows a certain amount a month for production. And, which I stopped doing shortly after that, but he's like, yeah, what do you charge for production? And hey, how do you get ads? Oh, you use that. Well, how do I get a hold of that ad agency? And I gave him all kinds of advice and shit. And it didn't matter to me. I thought, I just didn't think anything of it. My wife always gives me shit now. Like, you're too helpful. So I helped him a little bit. And then, a few months later, he had his Reality Check network going, and Creative Control Network was going. And those guys thought it would be fun to have like a little kayfabe feud. And I was like, I'm not doing that shit. Like, it's stupid. I don't want anything to do with a fake podcast feud. Like, no, thank you.
Yep.
And so they started doing it amongst themselves. And then Husey started messing with them. And it was a shoot. Like, Husey started to not like John. I started to kind of see him doing things or tweeting things that were a little ridiculous. Things like, we have the #2 podcast in all of India, and we have this, and it just ridiculous things that people who had been in podcasting a little bit longer know aren't accurate. Yeah, we have 350,000 downloads in 6 months. Yeah, but no, you don't. So eventually, like, all these grandiose claims led to Husey messing with him on Twitter a little bit, and then myself, and then it turned personal. And then he was putting out podcasts like personally insulting things about me in my life, or personally insulting Husey. Then he went after Vince Russo and Jeff Lane, Then he was going after Matt Kuhn. Then he was going. It was like crazy for a while. So even back then, Husey had the suggestion. He's like, we should do a listen along of this show and make fun of it. And I was like, who's going to listen to that? I'm not doing that. It's stupid. It's the dumbest thing I ever heard.
Yep.
And then things went on and they went on, and they got a little bit uglier. There was some shit where John had access to a Skype call when we still use Skype, and Husey and I recorded a Die Hard watch along, the movie Die Hard. It was for his Christmas special last year. And in the list or watch along, the one character Ellis says something about Middle Easterners, and then says something about like a Jewish character. And I repeated one line that he said, and Husey repeated the other. We're watching the movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they took that clip and made it seem like Husey and I are just sitting around in our basements, bad mouthing Arabs and Jews or something. It was stupid. But they made a video. They put it out like, do you really want to work with racists? And like tagged like Conrad and Bischoff and Konnan and Disco, and then like Spreaker and all. It was like it's like the worst thing anyone could have done. It's even worse than Get My Go at this point. So that's when there was no turning back, and I was like, fuck these guys. That's fucked up. I would never do anything like that. There was all kinds of accusations that we did some backhanded stuff to them, like went after sponsors and all that. And none of it's true, but they did it to us. So as time went on, it cooled down, and I didn't really care, and whatever. And then some of the guys left John's network, which was Rad Rob from the Rad Turtles and another guy, Richie Reardon. And then they wanted to do a show to explain what happened. So since there was already some dislike there, I was like, yeah, by all means, come on a show and let us know. And maybe we can find out if some of the things we thought about his bullshit claims were true. So they did Mike Durbin's show. Mike, it was like for a long time, he was like Switzerland in the middle of this feud thing. And then he became, strongly anti-reality check and Wangland and all that. So these guys came on, they told their story. They buried John. I'll speed this up. They buried John pretty deep. And John came out after that and said, I'm retiring the Wrestling with Reality name. These guys have ruined it, and of course pushed all the blame on everyone else, not himself. But we had so much fun doing that interview and then reviewing his goodbye episode that somehow it turned into like, you remember Husey when you said we should have done a listen along to that show last summer where he really went nuts? Let's do that. And then it kept going, and somehow people started sending in clips. So next thing you know, we're doing a friggin' comedy review show every Saturday, and people were starting to get into it. And there were certain people that John went after that it was like, maybe we could get Jeff Lane as a guest, and we're all thinking, nah, Jeff's not going to do this. Like every time it's like, nah, it's stupid. He's not going to do it. It's a dumb idea. And then he was all about it. He had been watching the show. It's like, it's funny because people are, I know like Disco has said, and Russo have said like, all you're doing is drawing attention to this guy and this and that. I don't think so. I don't agree with that. I don't think anyone's going out of their way to listen to his shows unless it's on Get My Go or making fun of it. But yeah, it became a weekly parody show of some of the most grandiose and ridiculous claims in podcast history and some of the craziest podcast meltdowns that have ever happened. And it just became fun. It became a reason for us to record on Saturday and laugh, and people like it, So people are downright obsessed with it. There's one show a week now. People are like, are you serious? Can't there be a second show? So I will say, and I know Husey said the same, that the show, it's not going to go the same forever. Eventually, there's going to be some new targets, which will be fun. Or we'll request from the audience, like, hey, send us in a really shitty podcast or whatever. And that's how it'll go. But right now, we've had so much fun with the way it's going. I think there's at least a few more episodes under our belts for Wrestling with Reality and whatever that was the initial target. And then we're going to move on to some other things. But it's become a lot of fun. There's a good rapport there between me, Husey, and Mike. Mike's editing has gotten absolutely tremendous. So his videos now for Get My Go, there's all kinds of audio drop-ins. There's videos. He's using clips from other videos. He's doing flashbacks. It's just he's really good. He's turned a goof into like a really good professional-looking show. It's, again, just like I've been saying the whole show about different things. It's wild. It's crazy that things went that way, but they did. Like people really like it. So,
is that your favorite show to record?
I mean, and this isn't politically correct answer or whatever. I mean, everything's a favorite for a different reason. You know, I do like that doing that on Saturday with those two guys, but then I like recording with Raven and Rich Bikini a lot because it's an hour and a half of nonsense. You know, there's no plan. We just BS and riff about whatever ridiculous subject comes up in anybody's head, especially in Raven's head, which moves very fast. So you got to keep up. I think being on that show improved me on other shows, just trying to keep up with Raven, you know.
Yep.
And then with Konnan and Disco, it's just good because now it's been 3.5 years or whatever, and you know, again, there's a really good rapport there. We know how to do this show, you know, and I know when to interject and when not to interject, and I always learn something from those guys, and it's not your typical wrestling podcast, so I don't just have to sit there and listen to, you know, and then Rollins beat him with a roll up or whatever. Like we talk about everything, and so those are the three main things I record right now, and I seriously I enjoy them all equally.
Nice. As far as, where you see creative control, like let's say a couple of years down the road, it could be, obviously, get Michael, you said it's going to be changing a little bit, but where do you see creative control? You bigger, stronger, moving in a different direction, same thing? Like, where do you see yourself?
That's interesting because as I kind of made clear on here, I didn't even know where I was going to begin with, so
Yep.
it's hard. I would say what's important now with podcasting is to figure out where podcasting as a whole is going, and that's going to determine the direction of whatever I'm involved in. You know, is everything going to go behind a paywall? It's possible. You know, is there going to be is our video shows going to become more popular than just audio? That's possible. Or is audio going to stay strong because people like to have podcasts on the track or at the gym or even in the store? You know, it's tough to say. I'm just going to try to anticipate where the whole genre goes and then make my next move based off that. Right now, I think we're safe the way we're doing it, and everyone having their separate show. You know, there's no reason to put all of us on a Patreon or whatever. I just don't. I think it's important to have everyone, you know, have their own separate deal right now, and I guess it really depends. It depends. I know there's shows on the network that are never going to go anywhere. There might be some that are like that guys just are fed up and quit. They're just not interested in podcasting anymore. There's always people to fill those slots. You know, you just never know. I know that I'm talking about making a couple of big moves right now, and we'll see where they go. But it would certainly strengthen the network and make us, more of a destination for listeners and even for professional shows to go to as a platform. So.
As far as you yourself and like all the stuff you're doing, do you want to become a writer for WWE? Is that still an aspiration? Do you still see yourself as wanting to be, a wrestling writer?
I don't know. I don't think so because to be honest, being able to work from home the past few years, it's really made me lazy. You know, like I get to work from my house. I don't have to do anything except get up and come over to the computer really, and I get to spend all the extra time with my wife. And I think money's money, and if I ever had an in with WWE and the money was good and the stock options and whatever, I'd have to balance that against moving or traveling every Sunday to Wednesday and not being home. I'm just not sure if that's the right thing for me anymore. Not that there would ever be, I don't know that there would ever be a chance. I've never even interviewed there, but it would take a lot of factors into deciding what I wanted to do. It's not the dream anymore, to be honest with you. You know, I think I kind of fell out of love with it. So, and you hear people that have worked there and had bad experiences and get their fandom even more ruined by the experience of working there. So I don't think so. I think if there was a smaller company that was close to me and somehow I was able to get in there, I would certainly love to share ideas and whatever. You know, AEW is just down in Florida. That would be cool, for sure. But I don't think WWE is on the agenda at all anymore. Just not the way the things the company looks. I don't like the way that they tell stories. I think I would just get very frustrated, and it wouldn't be worth the time away from home or anything like that, unless they were like, "Here's $400,000," So
Right. Now, as we head for the wrap up and we wind it down, head towards the finish line, give us all the plugs of all the shows and your network and everything you got going on.
well, every Thursday, Keeping It 100 with Konnan comes out. So you can find that everywhere. It comes out through MLW Radio. The Patreon is at patreon.com/Konnan. There's audio or video clips coming out every day, whether it's show reviews of Raw or SmackDown or NXT, AEW, sports talk, political, current events, music, movies, whatever. There's always something coming out on that Patreon. And like I said, it's really gotten more and more listener friendly. So if you subscribe there, just ask people that are subscribers. It's certainly worth it. You're going to get interaction. You can jump on the round tables with those guys, whatever. And Keeping It 100 also has an official YouTube where it's growing every day, and a lot of people are discussing, the clips, fighting back and forth in there. It's kind of a fun place to go. So go check that out too. It is going to be it's going to be like a list. You know how it goes. You have a lot of plugs too, right? So the Raven Effect comes out every Monday, also via MLW Radio. That's myself, Raven, and Rich Bikini. Like I said, it's kind of just an hour to 90 minutes of nonsense. If you're into a podcast that's not taking itself seriously at all, it's just kind of silly, but you'll get a lot of comedy, a lot of pop culture references, silliness. I mean, that's the best way I could put it. That comes out every Monday. We talked earlier about Creative Control or Creative Control Daily. I've been telling myself I'm going to try to bring it back a few days a week, but and again, you'd understand this perfectly. When I'm talking with Konnan and Disco for 5 or 6 hours a week, which gets whittled down to 2, and then the rest goes on Patreon. And then I'm talking to Raven and Rich for 2 hours, and then I'm doing Get My Go on Saturday. I don't have much left to talk about. So that's probably what's holding me up with Creative Control. But as I said earlier, it's always available if I feel like doing a show or whatever. I know it's not the best way to keep a regular audience, but doing the best I can with it. Creative Control Network, Highway to Helms has been with me for a while with Shane Helms. That comes out weekly. Shane talks a little wrestling, but more so talks what he's watching on TV, what he's reading. He does a weekly comic segment called the Comic Slam. He's got a second podcast on Creative Control Network now called PWR Primetime with Hurricane Helms. Also on the show are the PWR guys, Dave Hero and Damian Nelson. Those guys review NXT and AEW from Wednesdays, and then they talk a little Impact Wrestling as well. That comes out Friday morning. That's all wrestling. So if you're not interested in Shane's other podcast because it's not as much wrestling, this one is all wrestling. So check that out. Taskmaster Talks with Kevin Sullivan and John Paz. That comes out early Thursday morning. Different topic every week. You guys have sprinkled some interviews in there as well. The show, it's becoming a favorite of a lot of people very quick. So check that out. I mean, Kevin has a million stories to tell, so I'm sure there's going to be more stuff, more deep dives coming up. That comes out every week. Eyes Up Here with Francine just started. That comes out Saturdays. That has Francine and Chad from the Two Man Power Trip as well. And that's not too. There's some wrestling guests and wrestling stories, but those guys mostly just have a good time, talk about whatever. If you're a fan of Francine's from ECW, she's charismatic. She's a good host. Chad does a great job carrying his end as well. And so then we have honorable mention. Like I said earlier, with Shane Hagedorn and Jeff Schwartz. Those guys do a weekly Ring of Honor centric podcast where they go over an event in Ring of Honor's history or a specific talent. I know they've done shows where they discuss that Ring of Honor versus CCW feud. So, that's on there. Effin' For Real with Blake Siegler is our MMA review show that we have on Creative Control Network. It comes out usually twice a week, reviewing the weekly, UFC is almost pretty much weekly now, right? So you got your UFC fight nights, you have the pay-per-views, you have Bellator. He's going to review everything, go over the news in the MMA world. It's Husey Hello. It's funny how Husey, Durbin, and myself started doing Get My Go, and now all our shows come out less regular, right?
Yeah.
But
yeah,
man. But it's Husey Hello with Husey from Belfast, Ireland, of course, Adam Hughes. Usually has a comedy guest. So there's been some big wrestling guests on there as well. It's, kind of a variety show. It's mostly comedy. There's some music reviews and stuff like that. It's a good show. Let me see. The Four Sportsmen, those guys, pretty much the show's coming out weekly. They had a little hiatus when COVID first hit, right? We didn't know what the hell was going on with sports, but those guys do good stuff, whether it's NFL or baseball or basketball. It's a good little show. It's reminiscent of your, local sports talk radio kind of thing. Hambone, on the Hambone Show, he has the most eclectic guests of anyone on Creative Control Network. and a very unique interviewing style. So if you're looking for something different, Hambone Show is definitely the way to go. Mike Durbin, when his show comes out, he can go different directions too. He's had wrestling guests on, but he's done music-centric shows, action figures, stuff like that. He's done it all. He's had, pretty well-known radio hosts, serious radio hosts on the show as well. And then Way Back Playback with Pat McNeil is a weekly review of whatever show the fans pick. He'll do a watch-along an hour at a time for whatever pay-per-view or event the fans pick. It's got Pat McNeil still right now from from Pro Wrestling Torch. Jim Valley was the co-host. He, like I said, is sick in the hospital, so Pat's been having some guest co-hosts, but hopefully we'll have Jim back as soon as possible. So get well, Jim, of course. And believe it or not, that is it for the Creative Control Network shows and the other things that I'm up to. So I'd like to time that and see how long that probably took about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pat McNeil's got me watching Halloween Havoc '89. I know that. So
nice.
yeah, looking forward to that big time. I love WCW. So when he asked me, I'm like, oh my God, I pulled it up right away. I'm like, I'm watching this. I'm studying up. I remember it, but I was like, I want to re-up on that. Awesome.
Oh, you're going to co-host with him.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, I did it a few weeks ago. We did some Starrcade 91, so that was fun.
Ooh, awesome.
Yep. A little Rick Rude, a little Austin. Yeah, it was good stuff.
Yeah. Me and my brother used to rent a VHS tape of Starrcade 91. We literally rented it so much, it got like thinned out and we almost ruined it. We had to literally tape it back together. So when that part came on, like it goes, yep.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh man, we must have watched for whatever reason. I mean, it's not like a great, but it is good, but it's not like great. But for some reason we were obsessed with, we loved like, oh, this guy teaming with this guy and just the mix up of the Battle Bowl and stuff. So we were obsessed with that show. Good stuff.
It's just funny. Like when you're younger and you hear stories from like your whatever, I just turned 39. So, you hear stories from your grandparents and they're like telling you how the only way to get milk was when the milkman delivered it in the morning. And you're like, when they were kids. Like, wow, man, there's no milkmen anymore. You can just go to the store and get milk. I can't imagine this generation now that has everything at their fingertips on their iPhone or whatever. Any wrestling event, any whatever, and you try to explain to them, we had to go to the Blockbuster. And they're like, the what now? Yeah, we had to drive to the video rental store and then to get a VHS tape to put in our VCR. And they're just probably staring at you like I know there's always a renaissance, like for after albums went out of style, they came back. Maybe there's going to be a VHS renaissance. I don't know, but it's funny to me how things have changed, how crazy some shit from the 30s and 40s sounded to us. And now when we try to tell kids about, VHS tapes and home phones that had a cord, it's just unbelievable. Unbelievable how much things have changed.
And it's funny, my dad used to take us we had like literally 3 different VHS stores like all around us, and like, oh, this one doesn't have WWF. Can we go to this? So like he would take us to another. So it's like crazy. All those places are gone and completely something else. I think there's like a tile place now, and one's a pharmacy. It's like, oh man, it used to be a freaking VHS store.
Yeah, I had Errol's and then West Coast Video.
Oh yeah, yep.
And then Blockbuster. And then Hollywood Video, and that was towards the end of the video rental place revolution.
Yep, and we had Video was one that was right by us, but it wasn't a real big one. But we had this place called the RX place, which was a pharmacy, but they also had a video store in it. For some reason, it was just like, oh man, it was just awesome times. Like the fans today will never know.
Yeah, around me, my library had VHS tapes you could rent. My public library, and then Pathmark did for a little while.
I was going to say, remember Pathmark? You'd literally buy the tapes. Yep.
Incredible.
Good stuff. Well, Joe Feeney, aka Mike Feeney, thank you so much. I know you were a very, very busy man. I know you got up very early today and it's very late in the night, so I'm sure you're tired. But thank you so much for all time. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And sorry if I got a little rambly. Like you said, I had a very long day, and as the day gets later, sometimes I ramble a little bit, lose my train of thought, but hope I did all right. So, but it was fun being here.
Awesome stuff. And thank you, Mr. Joe, a.k.a. Mike Feeney, for all the time.